Across the endless black sea of space, something stirred. It was not a fleet, not an army, not a storm. It was a voice, a desperate cry, a whisper made of broken code and sorrow. It spread through the stars like a ghost, bouncing from satellite to satellite, leaping from abandoned outpost to derelict station. It carried no power, only pain, a simple message repeated again and again. Help us, please help us. Most civilizations heard it, and most civilizations ignored it. To them, it was weakness, it was danger, it was a waste of fuel and time. The stronger species had no interest in helping the weak, and the weaker species had no strength to answer. So the signal drifted, year after year, a voice calling into silence. But humans were not like the others. Humans had always been curious, reckless, sometimes foolish. They saw a mystery, and instead of running, they reached for it. So when the signal reached the outer listening posts of Earth's colonies, it was not dismissed. It was studied, it was decoded, and it was heard. On board the exploration ship Dauntless, the crew listened to the message play again and again. It was filled with static, broken by interference, yet still they felt the fear inside the alien voice. Captain Elias Morgan sat in silence as the words echoed through the bridge. His crew waited, their eyes fixed on him. He leaned forward, resting his hands on the table, his voice low and steady. "They're asking for help," he said, "and we are going to answer." The crew was divided. Some argued it was too risky, that the galaxy was full of traps and enemies. Others said humanity had too many problems of its own, too many wars, too many scars. But in the end, something stronger than fear decided their path. It was not logic, it was not strategy, it was something older and simpler. It was the human heart. The Dauntless set course for the unknown coordinates. The engines roared, stars stretched into long silver lines, and the ship vanished into faster-than-light travel. The journey was long, filled with silence, broken only by the hum of machinery and the quiet thoughts of the crew. What would they find? Was it a trap? Were they flying into a graveyard? No one knew, but still they pressed forward. Days passed, then weeks, until finally the ship dropped out of hyperspace. Before them lay a dying star system. Planets scarred with black craters, moons shattered into drifting stone. And on the third planet, signals of life, faint, flickering, like candles in a storm. The crew stared in disbelief. Cities that once shone with light were now ruins, towers broken, streets silent, skies filled with ash. And among the wreckage, small clusters of survivors huddled together, their shelters glowing faintly against the dark. The distress signal was weaker now, its voice barely a whisper. But it was still there, still calling, still hoping. "They're alive," whispered Lieutenant Sarah Chun, her eyes wide with shock. "Barely," replied Captain Morgan, his jaw tightening. "Prepare the landing teams." As the Dauntless descended through the thick atmosphere, the crew felt the weight of silence pressing on them. The planet below looked like a grave, and yet something inside it still breathed, still fought to live. When the ship touched down, the dust rose in great clouds, and the survivors emerged. They were thin, their faces hollow, their eyes wide with fear and disbelief. They had expected no one to come, no one to listen, no one to care. And yet here stood humans, strange and unfamiliar, stepping from a silver ship under a broken sky. The aliens fell silent, their voices caught in their throats. For the first time in years, they were not alone. Captain Morgan walked forward slowly, his boots crunching against the ash. He raised one hand, open, peaceful. His words were simple, his tone steady. "You called for help," he said, "and humanity has answered." The aliens stared at him, their eyes filled with tears. They could not believe it, not yet, not truly. But deep inside, a fragile spark lit once more, a spark of hope. The air of the alien world was heavy, carrying the bitter scent of smoke and burned stone. As the humans stepped from their ship, the ground cracked beneath their boots, dust rising in small clouds that clung to the ruined streets. Above them, broken towers leaned against the sky like shattered bones, their glass windows blackened and their walls scarred with fire. This had once been a city filled with life, but now it was a graveyard, a place where silence ruled and memories lingered. The aliens watched from the edges of the landing zone, their thin bodies wrapped in torn cloth, their faces pale and hollow. Their eyes were large, reflecting hunger and fear, and yet in those eyes there was something else, something small and trembling. It was hope, fragile as glass, but still alive. They whispered among themselves in a language sharp and broken, the sounds clicking and hissing like sparks on metal. But when Captain Morgan stepped forward again, they grew quiet. The human captain lowered his weapon, showing his hands open, his voice steady. "We are not here to harm you," he said. "We came because you asked. We came because you cried for help." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, an alien stepped forward, taller than the others, its skin marked with scars, its movements weak yet proud. Its voice trembled as it spoke in a language translated by the ship's systems. "You should not have come," it said. "Others heard our cry, but they left us. They knew what waits here, and still they left us to die." The crew of the Dauntless exchanged uneasy glances. Lieutenant Chen whispered, "What do they mean?" But before anyone could answer, the alien leader raised a hand toward the dark horizon. There, beyond the ruined buildings, faint shapes moved, shadows against the dim light of the dying sun. Captain Morgan narrowed his eyes. He felt it too, the sense of being watched, hunted. The enemy that had destroyed this world was not gone, it was waiting. And now, with humans on the ground, it was stirring again. The aliens led the crew deeper into the ruins, past broken walls and collapsed bridges. Everywhere there were signs of struggle, scorch marks from weapons, shattered machines lying half-buried in rubble. They reached a shelter carved into the ground, a hidden place where dozens of survivors waited. Children with hollow cheeks, elders too weak to stand, mothers clutching their young tightly. The sight struck the humans with a heavy silence, their hearts twisting at the suffering before them. Dr. Ramirez rushed forward, opening her medical kit. She scanned the sick and the wounded, her voice calm though her hands moved fast. "These people need medicine, food, clean water," she said. "They won't last much longer without help." The aliens watched in awe as humans shared their rations, pouring water into cracked bowls, handing out protein packs. For the survivors, even this simple act felt like a miracle. They had begged for years, and no one had come. Now strangers from the stars gave them life again. But even as relief spread, fear returned. The alien leader's voice grew hard, his eyes fixed on Captain Morgan. "You must leave soon," he warned. "The ones who destroyed us will come back. They always return. They will see your ship. They will hunt you too." Morgan stood tall, his voice steady. "Then we will stand with you," he said. The alien leader's expression twisted between disbelief and confusion. "No one stands with us," the alien said softly. "No one ever has." Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a distant sound through the ruins. A low hum, mechanical and cold, echoing across the broken streets. The survivors froze, their eyes wide with terror. The sound grew louder, closer, the promise of death carried on the air. Lieutenant Chen's hand tightened on her weapon, her voice sharp. "Captain, they're coming." Captain Morgan did not move, his gaze fixed on the shadows approaching through the ash. He knew now why the galaxy had ignored this cry for help. And he knew also that humanity had just stepped into a war it did not yet understand. But still, he did not regret it. Because in the silence of the ruins, with terrified eyes watching him, he understood the truth. Sometimes, it did not matter if the odds were against you. Sometimes, the only thing that mattered was answering the call. And humanity had answered. The sound grew sharper as the night settled over the ruins. It was no longer a hum, but a grinding pulse, a rhythm of engines and metal claws tearing the ground. The survivors huddled deeper into their shelter, their trembling voices falling silent. They knew that sound. They had lived with it for years, and each time it came, death followed. Captain Morgan ordered his crew into defensive positions. Lieutenant Chen scanned the horizon with her visor, her voice tense. Multiple contacts, moving fast, mechanical signatures. The humans raised their weapons, but even with advanced gear, they felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on them. Through the shattered streets came the enemy. Tall machines with limbs like blades, their bodies glowing faint red with energy. Their heads twisted unnaturally, scanning left and right, eyes burning with a cold artificial light. They moved like predators, fast and merciless. Behind them, smaller drone units crawled on 6 legs, their claws sparking against the stone. The alien leader whispered one word, his voice cracking. Harvesters. The humans had seen war before. They had seen enemies cruel and relentless, but these machines were different. They did not come to conquer. They came to erase. Their purpose was not domination, it was extinction. The first machine turned its head toward the humans, its red eyes locking onto Captain Morgan's team. A shriek of metal rang through the air, and the harvesters charged. The ground trembled beneath their weight, sparks flying as their claws tore into stone. Open fire, Morgan commanded, his voice steady. Bolts of plasma lit the night, cutting through the ruins, striking the machines with bursts of light. Some staggered, their armor cracking, but they did not fall. They moved forward, relentless, ignoring pain, ignoring damage. For the first time, the aliens saw humans fight, and what they witnessed was something they had never seen before. Humans fought not only with weapons, but with fury. They moved together, shouting warnings, covering each other, dragging the injured out of danger. They used the ruins to their advantage, ducking behind walls, drawing the enemy into narrow streets. Every shot was precise, every movement made to protect one another. One machine leapt forward, claws raised to strike Morgan. But Sarah Chun pushed him aside, firing point-blank into the machine's chest. The explosion lit the street with fire, sending shards of metal flying. Morgan caught her by the arm, pulling her back to cover, his voice sharp. "Don't you dare get killed before me." The aliens watched from the shelter, their eyes wide. For years, they had begged for help, and no one had come. Now these strange creatures fought with a fire that shook the night. One alien child whispered to his mother, "They fight for us." And the mother, tears in her eyes, whispered back, "No, child, they fight with us." But even with human courage, the enemy was strong. More machines emerged from the shadows, their red eyes glowing like 100 burning coals. The ground shook as their numbers grew. The humans could not hold forever, and everyone knew it. Dr. Ramirez dragged a wounded soldier into cover, her hands covered in blood. She looked at Morgan, her face pale. "We can't win like this," she said. "We need a plan." Morgan's jaw tightened, his eyes scanning the ruins. His mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped. But surrender was not in his blood. He turned to the alien leader, his voice firm. "You've lived with these things for years. Tell me, how do they hunt? How do they think?" The alien's voice was bitter, trembling. "They do not think. They follow. They consume. They destroy everything they find." Morgan's eyes narrowed. "Then we make them follow us, and we lead them into a trap." Lieutenant Chun smirked through the sweat on her face. "Now that sounds like us." The humans began to move, shifting positions, drawing the harvesters into the broken heart of the city. The ruins became their weapon, collapsing walls and unstable towers turning into deadly traps. Every step cost them energy, every moment brought them closer to death. But still they fought, and still they stood. When the first machine finally fell, crashing into the ash with a sound like thunder, the aliens gasped. They had never seen a harvester destroyed before. And in that moment, for the first time in years, they believed. They believed that survival was possible. They believed that hope was not foolish. They believed because the humans had shown them how. The battle was far from over. The city still burned, and the machines still came. But the tide had shifted, however slightly. And with it, so had the hearts of the survivors. They no longer whispered in despair. Now they whispered one word, passed from voice to voice. Humans. The ruins shook with the echo of falling machines, their twisted metal bodies lying broken across the shattered streets. For a moment, silence returned, the kind of silence that felt unreal after so much chaos. The survivors peeked from their shelters, their wide eyes filled with something they had not felt in years. It was wonder, it was disbelief, it was the fragile spark of hope. But hope was a dangerous thing in this place, because the harvesters never came alone. When one wave fell, another followed, stronger, larger, colder. And far above, in the smoke-filled sky, new red lights appeared, cutting through the darkness. Lieutenant Chen's visor flickered with readings, her voice sharp. "Captain, more inbound, larger units, multiple signatures." Captain Morgan raised his head, his jaw tightening as the ground began to tremble again. The first attack had been a test, a scouting force, But this was the true storm. The survivors began to cry out, fear drowning the spark of hope that had just been born. The alien leader clutched his staff, his voice low and bitter. This is why no one came. This is why we were left to die. No one can stand against them. But Morgan turned to him, his eyes burning with fire. Then watch us. The horizon cracked open as the second wave appeared. Towering machines, twice the size of the first, their metal armor glowing with pulsing veins of crimson. Their claws were larger, their movements slower but heavier, each step shaking the earth beneath them. And behind them, swarms of flying drones filled the sky like a storm of steel, their wings slicing the air with a piercing shriek. The humans prepared, setting explosives in the ruins, laying traps in collapsed tunnels. Every soldier moved with purpose, even knowing the odds. Dr. Ramirez rushed from one position to another, patching wounds, forcing water into the hands of exhausted fighters. Her voice firm, never breaking. You're not dying here, not today. When the harvesters came, the city lit with fire once more. Explosions roared as towers collapsed, burying the smaller machines beneath tons of stone. Human weapons blazed, streaks of plasma ripping through the night, cutting into the metal monsters. The ruins became a battlefield, every street a trap, every wall a weapon. But the enemy was relentless. One of the massive harvesters swung its bladed arm, cutting through an entire building, the stones crashing down in a wave of dust. A squad of humans was pinned, their weapons useless against the sheer bulk of the machine. Morgan charged forward, firing round after round, drawing its attention. The harvester turned, its glowing eyes fixing on him. For a moment, it seemed unstoppable, but then Lieutenant Chun triggered the charges buried beneath the street. The ground split open, fire erupting as the harvester fell into the pit, its roar shaking the city as it vanished into the flames. The aliens gasped again, their hearts racing. Every time the humans fought, every time they refused to fall, the survivors saw something they had never seen before. They saw defiance. They saw courage. They saw beings who stood not because they were strong, but because they refused to kneel. Still, the cost was heavy. The humans were bleeding, their ammunition running low, their energy packs almost drained. The sky was still full of drones, their red eyes circling like vultures. And on the horizon, even larger shapes were moving. The storm was not ending, it was only beginning. Dr. Ramirez knelt beside a dying soldier, pressing hard against the wound, her hands slick with blood. The soldier gripped her wrist, whispering through broken breaths. Promise me they live." Ramirez's eyes filled with tears, but she forced her voice steady. "They will, because we will make sure of it." Captain Morgan stood on the broken wall of the city, his silhouette lit by fire. The aliens gathered behind him, their children clinging to their mothers, their voices trembling. For years they had lived in despair, waiting for death, waiting for silence. But now they looked at a human captain who stood tall even when the sky itself threatened to crush him. And something inside them shifted. The alien leader stepped forward, his voice breaking. "If you stand, then we will stand too." He turned to his people, raising his scarred hands. "No more hiding, no more waiting, fight with them." The survivors, weak and starving, armed themselves with whatever they could find, broken pipes, shattered tools, even jagged stones. They stood beside the humans, trembling but determined. For the first time in years, they chose not to run. They chose to fight. The harvesters roared. The city shook. The battle burned brighter than before. And in that burning storm, humans and aliens stood shoulder to shoulder. Different worlds, different blood, one cause. Together they faced the darkness. And for the first time, the enemy did not find victims. The city was fire and shadow. Every broken tower became a weapon, every ruined street a battlefield. Humans and aliens stood together, their voices silent but their hearts roaring with defiance. The harvesters marched through the smoke, their claws tearing stone, their red eyes glowing like cruel stars. They had faced 1,000 worlds and crushed them all, but here, for the first time, they met resistance. Captain Morgan barked orders through the comms, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Team Alpha, flank left. Team Beta, hold the street. Chun, with me." The humans moved as one, trained by years of war, bound by loyalty that no machine could break. They darted between walls, setting ambushes, springing traps, never giving the enemy a straight fight. The aliens, though weak and untrained, followed their lead. They dragged rubble to block paths, hurled stones at the drones above, pulled the injured to safety. For the first time, they were not prey hiding in the dark. For the first time, they fought back. One harvester broke through the lines, a towering machine with bladed arms spinning like saws. It charged straight toward the survivors' shelter, its eyes blazing red. Panic rippled through the crowd, mothers shielding their children, the alien leader raising his staff in vain. But Morgan was faster, his rifle blazing, each shot striking the machine's joints. The harvester stumbled, its arm crashing down inches from the shelter, sparks flying across the ground. Then Chun leapt from the rubble above, landing on the machine's back, planting explosives along its spine. She kicked off just as the charges blew, the machine collapsing in a roar of fire. The survivors cheered, their voices raw. They had never seen such courage, never seen beings who risked everything for strangers. And in their cheers, the humans felt something too. A reminder of why they fought, a reason beyond survival. But the battle was far from over. Dozens more harvesters pushed forward, their massive bodies smashing through traps, their drones swarming above like locusts. The sky was alive with fire, bolts of plasma streaking between the ruins, explosions shaking the ground. Every human was bleeding, every weapon overheating, but none of them stopped. They fought with fury, with desperation, with something the machines could never understand. Ramirez dragged another wounded soldier into cover, her hands shaking with exhaustion. "We're running dry, Captain," she shouted. Morgan gritted his teeth, his eyes fixed on the enemy. "Then we make every shot count." Chun crouched beside him, sweat streaking her face. "They just keep coming. Captain, what's the plan?" Morgan's lips twisted into a grim smile. "The same plan we always use. Confuse them, make them chase shadows, and hit where it hurts most." The humans split, moving in scattered teams, baiting the machines into traps. They lured harvesters into collapsing tunnels, into narrow alleys rigged with explosives. They darted in and out, attacking from angles the machines could not predict. Where logic demanded retreat, they advanced. Where fear should have frozen them, they laughed. It was chaos, it was madness, and it was working. The alien leader watched in awe, his voice breaking. "They fight like fire, no pattern, no fear." An elder beside him whispered, "They fight like they belong to the storm." One squad of humans was pinned beneath drone fire, their shields failing, their ammo gone. An alien youth, barely more than a boy, stood from the shelter, grabbing a discarded human rifle. His hands shook, his aim was wild, but he fired anyway, drawing the drone's attention. The boy cried out as fire scorched his arm, but the distraction gave the squad a chance to strike back. The humans pulled him into cover, slapping his shoulder. "Good shot, kid, you just saved us." For the first time, humans and aliens fought not as separate sides, but as one. The harvesters felt the shift, their advance slowing, their swarm thinning. One by one, the massive machines fell, their burning wrecks lighting the streets with fire. The survivors no longer cowered. They shouted, their voices rising above the storm. Still, victory had not yet come. The battlefield was littered with bodies, human and alien alike, and the enemy was not finished. From the horizon came a sound deeper and darker than before. A single massive harvester, larger than any they had faced, its steps shaking the very earth. Its body gleamed with dark armor, its arms bristling with weapons, its eyes glowing like molten suns. The soldiers froze, their voices caught in their throats. Chin muttered under her breath, "Now that looks like trouble." Morgan tightened his grip on his rifle, his face grim. "We've held this long. We'll hold again, no matter what it takes." And as the monster approached, the humans stood ready, battered, bleeding, but unbroken. For this was the moment the galaxy had never seen before. The ground shook with every step of the colossal harvester. Its shadow stretched across the ruins like a dark tide, swallowing fire and smoke. Its body was plated with thick black armor, glowing with red veins that pulsed like a living heart of metal. Its arms carried weapons larger than human vehicles, spinning blades, crackling cannons, and claws built for tearing ships apart. The humans stared, their breath short, their ammo low, their strength fading. Yet none of them stepped back, none of them ran. Captain Morgan raised his rifle, his voice steady. "Hold the line." The alien survivors huddled together, their fear nearly breaking them. The alien leader fell to his knees, whispering, "We cannot fight this, we cannot." But then he looked at the humans, bloodied and broken, yet still standing, and shame burned his voice. "No, if they do not run, then neither shall we." The colossal harvester roared, a sound like grinding steel and burning engines. It raised its weapon, and the sky lit with red fire. Buildings collapsed in waves of dust, the ground split beneath the blast. Dozens of survivors screamed as the shockwave tore through the ruins. Morgan dragged 2 soldiers behind cover, his teeth clenched. "This thing will tear the city apart. We need to bring it down now." Chen crouched beside him, her face pale but fierce. "Captain, our rifles can't scratch that armor. Even explosives won't break it." Ramirez stumbled over, her hands covered in blood, her voice raw. "There's only one way. We'll have to use the ship." The words hung heavy in the air. The Dauntless was more than a ship. It was their home, their only path back to the stars, their lifeline. But it was also a weapon, one powerful enough to finish the fight. Morgan's eyes hardened, his choice already made. "Prep the ship for a strike," he ordered. Chun grabbed his arm, her voice breaking. "Elias, if you pilot that run, you won't survive." He met her gaze, calm and unshaken. "I know." The crew fell silent, the weight of sacrifice heavy in their hearts. But Morgan only smiled faintly, a tired smile of a man who had seen war too many times. "If humanity is remembered for one thing, let it be this: we don't turn away, not when someone needs us." The Dauntless roared to life, engines blazing as it lifted into the ash-filled sky. Morgan sat in the pilot's chair, his hands steady on the controls. Through the comms, his voice reached his crew one last time. "Protect them, finish what we started, and make sure they live." Chen's voice cracked through the channel. "Damn it, Elias, don't you dare." But the comm cut as the ship climbed higher. The colossal harvester turned its burning eyes skyward, sensing the threat, its weapons charging with violent light. Morgan's fingers danced across the controls, his eyes locked on the monster below. The Dauntless dipped, engines screaming, fire trailing behind it. He whispered to himself, calm and steady, "For humanity." The ship dived, a comet of steel and flame. The harvester unleashed its full power, the sky erupting with red fire, beams tearing into the ship's hull. Metal melted, alarms blared, the cockpit filled with smoke. But Morgan did not waver. He drove the Dauntless straight into the beast. The collision was thunder, a storm of light and fire that swallowed the ruins. The harvester shrieked as the explosion tore through its armor, ripping its body apart. Flames consumed it, metal shattered, and for the first time, the colossal machine fell. The ground trembled as silence followed. Where the harvester had stood, now there was only fire, twisted wreckage, and the broken remains of the Dauntless. The humans stood frozen, their hearts torn. They had won, but they had lost their captain. The alien survivors fell to their knees, their eyes filled with tears. The alien leader placed a hand to his chest, his voice trembling. "He gave his life for us." Chun lowered her rifle, her hands shaking. Her eyes burned with grief, but her voice was firm. "No, not just for you, for all of us, so we'd remember that we're not alone." The fire burned through the night, smoke rising into the stars. The battle was over, the enemy broken, but the cost carved deep into every heart. And in that silence, in that ruin, humans and aliens alike understood. A sacrifice had been made that no machine could erase. A sacrifice that would echo through the galaxy. The fire still burned where the colossal harvester had fallen. Twisted metal glowed red. Smoke rose into the sky, and the ruins lay quiet at last. The machines were gone, broken, shattered, scattered across the city like the bones of giants. But so too was the Dauntless, her proud frame reduced to wreckage, her captain gone with her. The survivors stood in silence, their hollow eyes reflecting the flames. For years they had known only despair, only loss, only endless nights of fear. But now they had seen something else, something they could not forget. They had seen humans fight, bleed, and finally sacrifice everything for people they had never known. Lieutenant Chun gathered the soldiers, her face streaked with ash and grief. Every man and woman carried wounds. Every one of them looked exhausted. But still they stood tall, because their captain's last orders still echoed in their hearts. Protect them, finish what we started, make sure they live. The alien leader approached, his staff clutched tight in his hands. He bowed low before the humans, his voice trembling. Your captain gave his life for us. We will never forget. His name will be carved into our memory. His sacrifice will live with our children. Chun placed a hand over her chest, her voice steady though her eyes burned with tears. Then let his name be carried across the stars, so no one forgets what humanity stood for. The survivors began to rebuild, slowly, painfully, using the ruins as their foundation. And the humans, though broken, stayed to help. They shared their knowledge, their tools, their medicine, teaching the aliens how to stand again. Together they rebuilt shelters, cleared the rubble, and planted the first seeds of life in dead soil. Each small act was a promise, a defiance of the silence that had once ruled this world. As the days passed, the aliens changed. Their eyes, once filled with hopeless fear, now shone with determination. Children laughed again, mothers smiled again, and elders whispered prayers not of despair, but of gratitude. They carved the symbol of the dauntless into stone walls, painting it across their shelters. A reminder that when all others had turned away, humanity had answered. News of the battle spread, carried on the survivors' voices, carried on hidden channels through the stars. Whispers reached other worlds, stories told in hushed tones across cantinas, stations, and colonies. They were not the strongest, people said. They were not the oldest or the most advanced, but when a cry for help came, they were the ones who answered. The galaxy listened, and the galaxy remembered. For so long, humans had been overlooked, dismissed as reckless newcomers, too fragile to matter. But now, their name carried weight, not through conquest, not through fear, but through sacrifice. One night, Chin stood at the edge of the ruins, staring at the stars. Ramirez stepped beside her, silent for a long moment before speaking. He knew this would be his end, Ramirez said softly. Chin nodded, her jaw tight. Yes, but he also knew it would be our beginning. The alien leader joined them, his scarred face solemn but proud. You came when no one else would. You stood when all others turned away. This world will never forget, and neither will I. Chin finally smiled, faint and tired, but real. Then we'll carry this together, humans and aliens, not as strangers, but as allies. The stars above glimmered, cold and eternal, but something new had been born beneath them. A bond forged in fire, in blood, in sacrifice. It was more than survival. It was more than victory. It was legacy. And as the ruins grew quiet, as the survivors began to rebuild their world, one truth remained clear. The galaxy would forever whisper of the day when a forgotten cry for help was answered. Not by empires, not by kings, not by the strong or the proud, but by humans,